next guest today is Commissioner Kevin Davis. In 2015, Davis took over as the 39th Police Commissioner of the Baltimore Police Department. Commissioner Davis is a 25-year veteran of the force, a lifelong Marylander, and a graduate of two of our local universities, Towson University and Johns Hopkins University. Thanks for being a part of our Game Changer show today. So it's been 2 years since you have been appointed commissioner, and there's been lots of changes, and some of those good changes, like police community relations, have improved. Talk to us about that.
Karen, sometimes it feels like 2 minutes, 2015, and sometimes it feels like it was 20 years ago. So it's been a action-packed 2 years, and a lot of changes have taken place. And we know, based on the riots and the unrest of 2015, that we had to interact with the community differently. So the first thing we did, we went from 0 police chaplains on the Baltimore Police Department to about 132 police chaplains. We brought back citizens police academies to Baltimore. I stood up some advisory boards. I have a youth advisory board. I have a LGBT advisory board, and we've just done as much as we can with the community. I make all the graduating trainees who graduate from our police academy, they walk mandatory foot patrol 3 to 4 months. They don't even see the inside of a car. So we know we have to interact more respectfully, differently, and in a way that our citizens expect us to police our neighborhoods. And it's been a lot of hard work.
Yeah, hard work. And what are some of the things that you've heard from the community as far as how things have changed for them?
Well, my favorite word that I hear is approachability. And it's not always articulated that way, but when people tell me that an officer initiated a conversation with them, when people tell me that a police officer went out of their way to converse with them or to otherwise interact with them, that makes me feel good about where we're going. We doubled the number of mandatory training hours in Baltimore, so we're introducing a lot of the softer communication skills to our profession. We do a great job with criminal law and rules and procedures and defensive tactics and those traditional types of training, but we've introduced training to our police officers that's non-traditional and something that hasn't been taught here in the past, and it really centers around communication skills, de-escalation skills. We're one of the only departments in the country that adopted ICAT training, integrated communications and tactics training. It's really de-escalation training on steroids. So a lot of strides have been made. We got a long way to go. We're not writing the final chapter yet, but I'm satisfied that we are making progress. And
I want to just back up and talk about that de-escalation training, because that is pretty big in this area, especially being one of the departments that has that training here.
It is big, and you know, one of the results of having now body-worn cameras, and we have over 1,700 body-worn cameras that are deployed in the field right now. The body-worn camera changes human behavior, whether you're a police officer or a resident. And you know, from enhanced policies, more consistent with the 21st century, we had to rewrite a lot of our use of force policies. We deliver training differently now than we have in the past. We enjoyed last year a 47% reduction in excessive force complaints, and this year, compared to last year, we're down an additional 44%. So if police officers can use their words in a way to de-escalate and resolve conflict, because that's what police officers do. They come to a person or a family or a neighborhood when that person, family, or neighborhood is in a crisis. So when we get there, we have to realize that our role is to de-escalate, to mediate, to make criminal arrests when appropriate and when necessary, but we should leave every interaction with a feeling that we just interacted with a customer. And you know, did we leave police community relations better or worse for our interaction with that person or that family?
Now I want to change gears and talk a little about the consent decree. So recently, a federal judge appointed attorney Kenneth Thompson to oversee policing reforms that's mandated by the consent decree. Talk to us about why that's important and if you feel that reforms will help lower crime.
Absolutely, and Ken Thompson is at the top of that ticket. Ken Thompson, born and raised in West Baltimore, is worked in Baltimore all of his adult life, and he's widely respected in every corner of our city. And to have as the deputy monitor Chuck Ramsey, who is a living godfather of American police chiefs. He led the DC Police Department for several years, Philadelphia Police Department for several years. He retired from the Chicago Police Department. So to have Ken Thompson and Chuck Ramsey and so many other really well qualified subject matter experts leading our reform efforts is exciting. I lived through a consent decree period with the Prince George's County Police Department for 4.5 years. So I know that a consent decree, when fully implemented with better training, better technology, better rules and procedures, better staffing, better outcome measurements, can absolutely make the crime fight stronger, and it can make our relationships with the community more transparent. And when we have transparent relationships, it builds a degree of genuineness that sometimes is lacking in our profession.
Yeah, all right. Well, we're going to talk more about this, but stay tuned at home. We'll be right back with Commissioner Kevin Davis. Welcome back with my guest, Commissioner Kevin Davis. So I want to switch gears and talk about crime in Baltimore. I want you to talk to us about some of the strategies that the department has put in place to help stop the violence, because now we're in the month of October and there's been more than 260 people that have been murdered. And this is causing, like I said, a lot of concern with the residents of Baltimore City. They're looking at the department as far as what can be done.
Well, Karen, the number one priority for Mayor Pugh, for her police department, for me, and frankly for our residents, is violence reduction. So how do we take a really concentrated, focused look at the relatively small number of people who are disproportionately responsible for violence, those that belong to drug organizations, those that belong to gangs, those that offend again and again and again, those who make decisions to carry guns every day. So we have a hyper focus on the known bad guys who are often no surprise to us when their identities are revealed, and we have to arrest them quickly, and then we have to work with our other partners in the criminal justice system, the state's attorney's office and our judiciary, to ensure that when we make a sound arrest and we get a prosecution that ends up in a conviction, that there's a consequence attached to committing violent crimes. I've been as progressive as any police chief in America when it comes to handling people who are addicted to drugs differently, people who suffer from mental illness differently. I don't believe those folks should be incarcerated. But if you murder, rape, rob, steal, or burglarize, I think that there is a place for a consequence. And that's a discussion that's not only underway here in Baltimore, but nationwide. But our focus really at the heart of violence reduction is the illegal carrying of guns.
And that brings us to our next point. You've been a big proponent of having a one-year mandatory sentence for first-time offenders who are caught carrying an illegal weapon. And just recently, the City Council passed what many considered a watered-down version of that legislation. Talk to us about that. Why that mandatory one-year sentence?
Well, Karen, it was absolutely watered down, and I was really happy to partner with Mayor Pugh and City Council President Jack Young to introduce that local legislation. Frankly, too many people make a decision in Baltimore to carry a gun. And when you look at jurisdictions that have sustained violent crime reductions in America, and there aren't too many, but Washington, D.C. is one, New York is another, Los Angeles is a third. The consequence for illegally carrying a gun in those jurisdictions makes it so prohibitive for a person to make that decision that they're leaving the guns at home. They're finding other ways to resolve their conflict. In New York, 3.5 years. So what we proposed in Baltimore was a one-year mandatory. And it got watered down, certainly, but the thing that I'm most proud of is that it is now a topic that's on the tips of everyone's tongues. We're all talking about it. We may not agree on how to get there with it, but at least that subject has been brought to the forefront, and we're talking about the most important factor that drives violence in Baltimore, and that's accessibility to guns.
And you've also traveled to Annapolis to talk to lawmakers
I
there. How is that going?
Unsuccessful. and I've spent many years in Annapolis successfully offering testimony on many bills over many years. But the gun issue, it evokes a lot of emotion in people. Some folks go immediately to the Second Amendment, and some folks go to gun control. And really the topic for the police department and public safety has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. It has nothing to do with gun control. It has to do with holding someone accountable and offering a swift consequence to a decision to carry a gun on our streets. Because guns being carried on our streets, if not for that gun on that person, they would find another way to resolve their petty conflicts. And most of the motives associated with our murders are very, very petty, and they should be otherwise resolved.
Now, what do you say to those who argue that they have a gun for protection, but they forgot to register it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of hypotheticals out there.
Yes.
You know, what about the nun who's on her way to church who forgets that she has a firearm in her sock? And I embellish that a little bit, but there's a lot of hypotheticals out there. I've been a police officer for 25 years. I've never personally, and I've locked up a lot of people who've chosen to carry guns. I've never encountered those hypotheticals. But when those hypotheticals exist, the state's attorney's office has the discretion to apply and offer a mitigating prosecution. So in the event of that hypothetical, there's always prosecutorial discretion.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So we are nearing the end of 2017. What are your outlooks for the end of 2017, and what are your future goals?
Well, violence reduction is number one. Better relationships with the community that's built on mutual respect is right up there with violent crime reductions. And then really the implementation of our consent decree, because our consent decree compels better training, better technology, better policies and procedures. Part of our consent decree actually involves a staffing study. So the monitors will look at the size of our agency, they'll take a look at how many sworn versus civilian officers we have. So a lot of hard work is in front of us. We've made a lot of progress already, particularly with our use of force training and our relationships with the community. We can and we will get better. The final chapter is never written in our profession, and it probably will never be written in Baltimore. There will always be more to do and more improvements to make. But I'm excited about this opportunity to work with the mayor, her team, the city council, and the monitoring team to make this police department America's greatest.
All right, and we'll end it there, making it America's greatest. Thank you so very much for being a guest on Game Changers, Commissioner Kevin Davis. And stay there, we'll be right back.